Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. On my Patreon-supported YouTube channel about Norse language, myth, runes, and related topics, I have recently been covering the actual Old Norse written sources for the myth of Ragnarok, the end of the world where the gods die. And a question I've been getting again and again while addressing this is whether Ragnarok has already happened, whether it's part of the so-called mythic past, or whether it is something that is projected to happen, if it's part of the mythic future. Now, if you read these original sources, I think it's impossible to conclude that it's in anything but mythic future. It has not happened yet. So I want to cover why that's solidly establishable and a little bit of why maybe people might get a little bit confused about it. Hey, if you have never thought about supporting this channel, here's a reason why. You are watching it. And it is my main life's work and supports my life. And if you support me on Patreon, you get not only access to live interviews, but also live Zoom calls with me called office hours where I answer questions about Old Norse and such. And occasionally other little things that I think about as perks from time to time. There's also my books. Remember that you can order already signed books from Boulder Bookstore. You can also make personalization requests there, although it can take a little bit of time to fulfill that. You can also request a personalized All the Best on cameo.com/Norse by Southwest. Well, back to today's video now. So the source for Ragnarok that I've already covered in one or two videos is the poem Völuspá, which is the first poem in the collection called the Poetic Edda. And Völuspá begins with an account of the mythic past, earlier times, and typically uses the past tense for those things, all the way up to stanza 17, where we see Uns thrir quomu, that's past tense, until 3 came. Stanza 18, On thou ne ottu, they did not have breath, past tense. Now, Old Norse narratives can vary between past and present tense, even within one sentence. That is something that can make Old Norse narratives a little bit weird sounding if translated directly into English with exact word equivalents. But it's notable that the predominant verb tense here is past in the first part of Völuspá. Then we get a lot of present tense verbs, starting around stanza 19. Ask veit extanda, I know and ash stand. It is called Yggdrasil, heitir Yggdrasil. Stanza 20, Thathan koma moyer, from there young women come, present tense, not the quomu, past tense of 17. Then back to past tense as she starts talking about the first war, she being the Volva, the witch Osiris who's telling this. To Heimdallr's and Odin's secrets, to Odin's solicitation of her telling about all this stuff, to Baldr's death, which is apparently mythic past, even though it's sometimes regarded as a sign of Ragnarok coming, and then even to the upbringing of Fenrir's children. And then in stanza 40, we get still often present tense verbs, but Old Norse tends to talk about the future very often in present tense because there's not a formal future tense. That may sound weird, but it's actually the same as in English, right? Tomorrow, I'm going to Golden, right? It's something that will happen tomorrow, but I'm not saying will, right? It's just I have an appointment 2 days from now, right? Not I will have an appointment 2 days from now. English also doesn't have a formal future tense in the sense that you don't change the verb, you just use this modal will. Now, Old Norse also does have a modal will. That verb is munu, rather than vilja, the one related to English will. And we actually do even see that in some of the account of Ragnarok, especially in this famous stanza 44, Bröder munu berjast, brothers will fight one another, right? Future tense. Mun engi maður öðrum þyrma, so no man will honor another, respect another. Again, truly marked future tense. So there's no past tense verbs used of Ragnarok starting at stanza 40, which is about where I regard in the Codex Regius manuscript of the Poetic Edda the tale of Ragnarok to begin. Same in the Högsbok manuscript, if you're wondering if that's any different. Same in Vavthrudnismal, the other poem in the Poetic Edda that has a lot of information about Ragnarok, although again there Baldur's death is past tense, so even if that's a sign of Ragnarok, even if something is leading up to Ragnarok in the future, that's already happened. I'm going to give you a quick word from my friends and partners at Grimfrost. I'll come back and talk about why I think people might get confused about the past or future occurrence of Ragnarok. So again, when this event is discussed in Old Norse, and our truly most original sources, the poems of Völuspá and Vafþrúðnismál, which are Snorri Sturluson's basis for his story of Ragnarok in the Prose Edda. Remember that the Prose Edda is kind of a secondary thing to the Poetic Edda, or at least to the collection of poems that includes the Poetic Edda. So that's all future. Where do people get the idea that maybe Ragnarok's already happened? I think there's a few possibilities. The number one possibility that suggests itself to me is simply that somebody said it somewhere, right? I can't keep track of what every pagan guru or popular book or TV show or whatever says about Ragnarok, and a lot of people have decided that this pretty vague myth, remember, see my videos about what the Old Norse written sources actually say, because they're not as specific as people often make them out to be. A lot of people make it sound like this pretty vague premonition of bad things happening and people being in conflict and there being natural disasters as referring to really specific stuff, and it's really hard to make it apply to really specific stuff. You know, if it were supposed to refer to very specific stuff, I mean, perhaps you have religious beliefs that imply that. I can't speak to that, not being a practitioner of Asatru or Norse paganism. But you would expect that those specific events would probably be Scandinavia specific, and I've occasionally seen weirdos claim that this is a premonition about World War III or the US Civil War even, or something like that, and that's very unlikely. Why would they be thinking that far into the future when you know, there were enough bad things that were going to happen in Iceland or Scandinavia before that, if anyone, you know, could even see into the future, which I don't personally believe. There's also, I think, this notion of cyclicity that comes into a belief that Ragnarok might have already happened. So the account in Völuspá ends with the world being reborn after Ragnarok and gods coming back, new gods perhaps being born, human beings being there as well. You can easily get the notion that Ragnarok is a cycle. Maybe it was regarded as a cycle by some people in the medieval Viking Age world, but we don't know that. We're never told it's a cycle. We're told of the world beginning in Völuspá, then the world ending in Ragnarok, and then being reborn once. We're not told that it's a cycle. So we can't 100% for sure infer, based on what's actually preserved, written in Old Norse, that it's a cycle. Yes, you can infer that if you want to, but there's no way to prove it or demonstrate that that's definitely what anyone thought back then. And I think another thing that makes people sometimes think Ragnarok is in the past is that the conditions, the natural disasters described, sound a lot like Iceland. So, you know, maybe what's being described is a really bad volcanic eruption followed by a really bad long winter or something like that. And so people are talking about this as something that's already happened in the past. But I don't think that's true, again, because the verbs are future tense. It's not this thing erupted, it's this thing, you know, it's that the flames will reach to the sky, right? It's something coming, and it's never implied that it's already happened before or that anything of comparable magnitude has already happened before. So I hope that satisfyingly answered this question, at least from my perspective as someone very familiar with these Old Norse texts. And I hope that you'll take a look at my Patreon if you haven't already. It's what keeps this channel going, with free information about Norse myth, runes, language, etc. from someone who knows a lot about them, to put it plainly. And anyway, to all of you out there from beautiful Colorado, surprisingly lush and green Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.